everyone, my name is Esmerelda Refutation, and today I will be reviewing, by making competitive cheer a sport, we will, one, protect the athletes, decrease the stereotypes that have been created, and lastly, help meet Title IX requirements for gender equality. I'll be going over these point by point, as well as presenting my own counterclaim. Starting off with my counterclaim first, competitive cheer differs from sideline cheers. I'm just making that clear as of now. But competitive cheer tends to evolve from the other. Modifying competitive cheer as a sport under Title IX will result in more impracticalities and drawbacks than fixing and modifying the status quo we currently have. Instead of attempting to gain a title, we should be urging our coaches and administration to be actively investing in the safety of our own team with proper education, equipment, and stunts that reflect our funding. Her first contention protects the athletes, using evidence brought by the American Medical Association, suggesting better safety measures with appropriate surfaces and appropriate coaching. However, considering the sport under Title IX does not necessarily translate to better safety measures, but rather cutting public cheering programs in general. The United States Sports Academy in 2011 made the note that cheerleading is actively becoming one of the most dangerous activities for women, athletically speaking, because worldwide it's increasing in popularity and it's evolving from, sideline, rah, go team, to high-powered, complex, acrobatic shows to motivate the crowd. Cheerleading is racking up to sprained wrists, twisted ankles, damaged knees, strained backs, and much worse. Again, this is from the United States Academy. Although modifying Title IX would help standardize and set competitive cheering regulations for schools, it would come at a cost. Not every publicly funded school can afford to title competitive cheer as a sport. The leniency that comes with the current broad term cheer entails different safety accommodations and stunts that reflect the funding levels of the school. My opponent did an amazing job at listing the demands of competitive cheer, from expensive mats to state-of-the-art gymnasiums to tumbling classes and all that whatnot. But forcing all public schools to comply with the expensive standards of competitive cheer will result in cut cheering programs and a lot more sideline rah-rah cheering, and that's kind of boring. We don't really want that. If we truly want to protect our athletes, we have to improve the status quo. According to AACCA, better safety measures is improved with better education for coaches and school administrations, which don't require a modification of Title IX at all. In fact, the National Cheerleading Safety Foundation president, Kimberly Archie, says, coaches don't want to be in trouble for hurting kids. Coaches want these tools, they want this knowledge, and they're looking for this kind of education. The American Association of Cheerleading Coaches, and admin, which I already referred to earlier, is currently doing such. March is the National Cheerleading Safety Month, and they're in charge of having a newsletter distributed to local schools as well as other components or those that are involved with cheer. So if we really want to help protect our cheerleaders, we need to emphasize education. And then we need to give our schools and coaches an initiative by supporting our own team. Her second contention was we should help meet Title IX requirements for gender equality because women athletes deserve the same benefits of other athletes of other sports and the ones that they're provided with. Title IX defined, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation of, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination of any kind under education or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Fact of the matter is, the majority of publicly funded cheer teams are encouraged to be sidelines and not competitive for the same reason I already previously said. Most middle schools and high schools don't really have the funds for expensive equipment that comes with competitive cheer. And since sideline cheer serves the core purpose of team support and not competition, it complies under Title IX. Fortunately, varsity cheer and college cheer function mostly due to the more available funds. Cheerleaders are more susceptible to injury and improper treatment due to inappropriate coaching and equipment, but they're not being denied any of the benefits that a male athlete would receive. One of the primary goals of Title IX was to provide more opportunities for young girls and women to participate in sports and to receive the same benefits as their male peers. Although current estimates from 2005 says that up to 80% of college and universities are not in compliance, the numbers and opportunities have come a long way since then. College cheer is intense, but it's progressed far beyond sideline cheer, and no one denies that. But if my opponent truly feels that our school is denying her basic benefits as an athlete, truly win this debate by taking Cal Poly to court. Her last contention was to raise curiosity for those that demean the sport. Curiosity isn't the problem as much as respect is. Winning the argument of cheer does not necessarily classify to winning their respect. The negative stigma that surrounds the false stereotypes of cheerleading is making it difficult to truly educate the public. But we're getting there. If people don't respect your program now, says Jim Lord, Executive Director of the American Association of Cheerleading Coaches and Administration, just throw this word sport around and see how much worse they think of you. Respect is earned, and there are plenty of good teams that are getting by doing what they're supposed to do and by being a good role model. So therefore, if we truly want to give athletes a chance to educate outsiders about what the sport really entails, exposure helps the general public see the reality of the physical exertion with performing the skills of competitive cheer. We're doing a pretty good job now. In fact, ESPN airs the national cheerleading competition, as well as the majority of publicized sporting events have, the halftime show with wow, with the cheerleadings. And we are breaking stereotypes. Hollywood is deviating away from your typical mean girl cheerleading portrayal, and that doesn't really necessarily entail changing the Title IX requirement. So in conclusion, changing competitive sport will result, by going with what my opponent has proposed, changing competitive sport will result in cuts with public cheering programs. And as cheer intensifies and escalates from sideline to competitive, college cheerleaders are granted the same benefits as male, therefore a modification is unnecessary. And lastly, respect is earned. Educating the public by means of exposure is more efficient than simply changing a title. Modifying the status quo with an emphasis on proper education and with coaches and administration will result with less impracticalities and drawbacks than redefining competitive cheer as a sport under Title IX. Thank you.
All right, well, the proposition is labeled pretty clearly. The secondary issues are laid out. It sounded to me more like you interpreted the advocate's claim as an issue of policy, and I don't remember that it was being presented that way. So there's a little bit of complexity in this argument that may be past what is really the subject of the discussion. I did like the argument that you had that suggested that a switch to Title IX status would have consequences, but they would not necessarily be positive consequences. Your explanation about the cost issue, I think, needed to be explained a little bit more. I get a general idea about what you're talking about because they would be required to spend money that is equivalent, and they can't afford to do that, so it's easier to just get rid of the program. That sounds like what the argument is saying there. I think you need to have some examples to demonstrate that, but I understand the concept behind it. I appreciated that you went and got a lot of information from authoritative sources on this particular subject, and that you use them effectively. I especially, for example, like the quote that you had on the third point from the one coach who said, you want to see how people disrespect you, put in the word sport and see what the reaction is. I mean, that almost, where are you? You're back there somewhere. That almost directly applies to the argument that the advocate was presenting and suggests that you'd have kind of a backlash attitude toward what's going on. And that was, I think, the third point that was being presented there. So, I think the Title IX issue probably needs to be explained a little bit more. You defined what it is, but its application is where some of the problems exist. And I think the argument that defines it as a sport presents particular barriers. I think that's kind of the crux of your response to this whole argument, that doing this is going to produce a long-term problem. So like I said, it's a little bit more of a policy argument than just the issue of fact, although there are some places where there are good disputes and facts. A couple of places, like you mentioned, you pointed out some of the data might be a little bit old. 2005, you have a quote from, and I'm going, well, a lot of programs are not in compliance as of 2005. That's 11 years ago. I don't know that that continues to be the case in that situation. I thought you summarized pretty effectively. I would say that it seems like you were rushing through the whole presentation, but of course you did go a little bit over time, and you were very thorough, so I don't know how you would have gotten that in without talking as quickly as you did, except I think you might make some choices about to use a few fewer issues that you're talking about and focus on simpler points given the time limits that you have. It wasn't a big problem, just you have to have active listeners who are willing to do that. And I don't know that everybody in here was as active in listening as they could be. I assume that they were, but I wasn't watching them all. Yeah, they probably were. Okay.